Welcome to the Kennedy Events Podcast, where we feature top marketing, communications, and future of work leaders and share their biggest takeaways and insights. We love these conversations and hope you will too. Let's get started.
Welcome to today's podcast. I'm Paige Buck, partner and chief strategy officer at Kennedy Events. Before I introduce my guest, I want to give a big thank you to Stride Services. Stride provides outsourced bookkeeping, accounting, and CFO services for professional service firms. Go check out their website at www.stride.services for more information. So I'm super excited to introduce Russell Benaroya, co-founder and partner at Stride, coach, speaker, and author of One Life to Lead. Entrepreneurship is a journey and it's hard. After 20 plus years of investment banking, private equity, tech, and healthcare entrepreneurship, Russell's working with other entrepreneurs and business owners to help them achieve their goals. Hey, Russell, you ready to jump in?
Oh, I'm so thrilled, Paige. This is awesome. Let's rock and roll.
I'm excited too. So you wrote a book called One Life to Lead that speaks to business success through better life design. What inspired you?
In 2018, my family and I decided to move to San Jose, Costa Rica for a year. And the impetus for that decision came from a moment, as often is the case when you decide to change your life trajectory at some level, there's some moment. And the moment was during a snowy car ride back from a ski trip over winter break. I had two kids that were preteens. And we're driving in the car. I'm listening to this Tony Robbins podcast. My wife is like rolling her eyes next to me, but bearing it. And the title of the podcast was 3 Steps to a Breakthrough. And Tony Robbins said something that triggered a thought that I had. So I turned down the radio and I looked to my wife and a little, I'll say kind of like in an irritated fashion, I said, yeah, Melissa, well, why haven't we ever talked about where we want to be in 5 to 10 years? Like as if it were her responsibility or I was being critical. And she said, well, that's because it's never really been about us. It's always been about you. And we've just been along for the ride. And she was talking about this journey of entrepreneurship and trying to build this business and raise money and stay in the game. And that was the beginning of a thread that over the course of the next 8 to 10 months, we pulled to really realign what is the life that we're trying to architect and what behaviors and patterns was I not that aware of, obviously, that were contributing to creating some of my consistent challenges. And when we moved to Costa Rica and I created a little bit of space to just reflect on those patterns, I started to write and I wrote a lot. And then I got back to the US and I thought, this isn't just about me. I don't think I'm alone, as entrepreneurs often feel like, oh, it's very isolating, but I don't think I'm alone. I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel this same way. And I went and interviewed a bunch of entrepreneurs and that began the makings of what ultimately became the book.
Wow. So when you and Melissa are there in that moment, and I don't know if that's like a stabbed you in the heart with that comment about yourself, but when you were able to like pull up from there, what was the very first step to reflecting? And then I don't know whether that was the first step that was a baby step that led to Costa Rica.
Yeah. The first step was letting go of control. The first step was letting go of having to find a solution. What did I do? I did what many people would do, which is like, oh, well, then let's find a 5 to 10 year goal. I'm going to go find these worksheets and we're going to work through them and we're going to sit down and we're going to plan it out. And like, that wasn't the answer. The answer wasn't to find a solution. The answer was just to lean into the relationship and start to talk like partners and share our fears, our goals, and our dreams. But let me get back to really our fears. And like, I realized that I spent so much of my time living between my ears, right? Living in stories in my head that really weren't serving me. So a story in my head might look something like, people really care about what I do or don't do, right? So I need to make sure that I'm showing up at all these events and I'm doing all these things, and I'm a venture-backed entrepreneur and I'm this and I'm that. Like, that's just a story. The truth is, most people don't really care what I do. Why am I spending all this time worrying about the perception of others? That's a good example.
Uh-huh. So there's a fear, the fear in there. What's the fear under that? Because since you touched on fear and then you went to perception.
Yeah. Well, I think the underlying fear is not being worthy. And so the underlying fear is, oh, I need to prove my worth versus live my worth.
Mm-hmm.
Prove my worth versus live my worth. And as Melissa and I continue to dialogue around what it really means to build a fence around our relationship and our partnership, and we could talk from the place of context, not content, like context, like how am I feeling? We could start to find some common ground around architecting a shared path forward, rather than it being, oh, this is just the Russell Benaroya show. And the key takeaway ultimately from the book is that how you lead your life is how you lead your business. And so there is a business orientation to the book, of course, but so much of what we bring to the business comes from all that we've created and manifested in our day-to-day. And some things serve us well and some don't. Let's be aware of what does and doesn't.
Well, I really like that. It also kind of dovetails with that, like how you do something is how you do everything, or how you do one thing is how you do everything. But early in the book, I remember getting very stuck on your call to investigate and identify what your principles are. And I was like, well, I mean, I think of myself as a principled person, and certainly I have values, but what the heck, can I name one? What are they?
Totally.
What was that exercise like for you? And then, like, how do you coach somebody through an exercise like identifying their principles?
Yeah. Oh, the exercise for me was a lot of fun. I took it from 2 points of view. One was, think about times in your life where you found yourself feeling like you compromised, or you found yourself in a situation that really wasn't good. Like maybe it was a deal that you did with a client and you're like, oh, I knew I shouldn't have done that, but I did it anyway. Well,
yes.
Why did I do that? How would having a certain set of principles maybe have mitigated against that happening? And so that's what I thought about. I was like, okay, how would a principles-based approach to decision-making keep me from some of the things I have done that have required a lot of time to crawl myself out of? That's number one. Number two was make my principles a little bit aspirational. So if I have a principle of I wake up every day with the intent of pursuing fun and adventure, right? That's a pretty aspirational principle. Now, how that could manifest itself 20 different ways. And so the idea of principles is not like values you stick up on the board and just see them, but you actually make them living. Like, okay, what are some ways that can manifest itself? And it could be small things. For example, I have a principle of I show gratitude in small ways often. Well, one way to show gratitude in small ways often is keep $25 gift cards for Starbucks in your backpack. And when you see somebody in line at the store, like just turn around and give them one, or just pass them out because you have a nice thought about somebody. Like small things that you can do to embed that's been pretty fun to just work on. And it's really just working on yourself. You're working on your code. And that's the lifelong journey. It's not like, oh, write them down and you got it all figured out.
Right. I know process. I have a bunch of things on my wall that I felt like once they were on my wall, they were somehow embedded. And then 3 months goes by and I realize I haven't looked at the wall. So it's a lifelong practice, you say?
And choose one, like choose one thing for this month that I'm going to orient some actions around that are in service to this thing that I call my principles.
This is all very actionable lessons you're sort of applying to yourself. And then I imagine this is similar to what it looks like when you're coaching entrepreneurs. But tell me a little bit about that. You talk about focusing energy on critical success factors.
Yeah. So the entry point for supporting an entrepreneur in their journey of self-discovery varies. Like some people are really, really focused on wanting to scale their business, how they get from here to there, and what got them here won't get them there. Like that's an example. Some people are really focused on building out a real intentional culture in their organization. And so my starting point really depends on where that person is in their process. But yes, it usually comes back to a few core foundations. One is leading with principles, knowing and getting into your zone of genius, understanding where you get energy and where you don't get energy, what gives you energy and what drains your energy. That's number 3. Number 4 is, how do you separate all the crazy stories in your head with the facts? Because so much gets manifested that is purely made up. And then we talk about action and execution. So to your last comment about critical success factors and action, you could call them OKRs or whatever. You could have the best ideas in the world. We could talk about all this forever, but unless you execute with the intent of learning something and have the courage to learn, it doesn't matter. So that's a bit of coaching.
Yeah.
To get them to go.
Yeah. Are there challenges and blind spots you think entrepreneurs have that others don't, or are there big ones that you see arise over and over again?
That's a good question, Paige. Let me think. Are there blind spots that they have? The reason I'm pausing on that is because it depends. It depends on the personality type of the individual. And that's why for everybody I work with, I always start with the Enneagram. And the Enneagram is a great assessment of style and personality, because depending on your Enneagram type really does dictate a bit more about how you see the world. Do you see the world really carefree? Or do you see the world like something that you're not going to let control you? Or do you see the world as something where you really want to define yourself as an individual? Or do you see the world as something you need to show up and be a chameleon and please everybody? And so you always put on the right suit for the right circumstance because you always want to look like you've got everything nailed. Depending on where your Enneagram is at will often dictate where your blind spots are. And I have found that to be such a powerful opening for the process.
And so if I love the Enneagram, I've definitely got an Enneagram book on my shelf. And I think it was actually my business partner that introduced it to me like 20 years ago. But so it's one of 9 numbers. And then there's like wings that flesh out a little bit more about who you are. And there's what you go to when you're under stress. I'm so curious, Russell, what is your Enneagram number?
Do you want to guess?
I wrote down 7. Are you a 7?
Oh, you wrote down 7. No, I am a 3.
You're a 3.
Yeah, I am a 3.
Okay.
Which in many ways, if you really dig into it, probably supports why I wrote this book in some ways. But yes, I am a 3. 3 is known as an achiever. Like I'm a high producer. I'm like always on. It's a little hard for me to unlock my feelings because I spend a lot of time making sure that other people are happy. And I want to show up in a way that like everybody feels great, right? Everybody feels good. And I'm confident I got it. And so when I told you early on, when Melissa and I were trying to figure out our partnership, unlocking like what is really underneath the words is a little harder for 3s. And so in many ways, the book was a catharsis exercise more than anything else. For you, I'm going to guess I'm going to guess you're a 9.
I'm a 1. So you were very close.
Oh,
Because that's
yeah.
the diplomat wing. I don't know what
Yeah.
the exact word is for 9, but 1, when you were talking about your orientation to the world, I was like, or it's something broken that only I can fix. Like everything is wrong and I have to fix it, including myself. That's an ungenerous viewpoint of the 1, right? The perfectionist. For
Yes, the
sure.
perfectionist.
But
Yeah.
the 3 was, I remember taking the test and it was like, you could be a 1 or a 3 because it's like,
Yeah.
and the shorthand I was taught for 3 was like, you just want to get it done. And you're like, what is holding me up checking this next thing? Get out of my way. I want the checkbox checked.
So right.
Yeah.
You're
Does
so
that
right.
land?
Oh my
Interesting.
gosh. Yeah,
So
totally.
then what was that process for you of living in Costa Rica and writing? And you didn't have a list as long as your arm of all of the things you needed to do and all of the things you needed to achieve.
I finally realized when I was there that when I let go of trying to commandeer a list of of tasks that were designed to make me feel productive, when I finally let go of the list of tasks to make me feel productive, that the world, in fact, got a lot bigger. It got more abundant, more serendipity, more opportunity, more curiosity, more exploration, more energy, more possibility, more people that I met, more this, more that. And I was like, wow, I get it. Like, how sometimes you see people that you're like, man, things just land for them, but they don't seem like super structured or organized at all. Like I tasted that,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a really amazing opportunity for me to let go of worrying about what other people think and just doing what gives me energy. And it was helpful to be out of the country to do this, by the way. I think it'd be a little bit harder if I were here in Seattle. Um, but that's the work. The work is not, oh, I had that experience. I figured it out. I'm all good.
I'm done now.
I'm done now. And again, that's why I really appreciate having the book as an ongoing guide, because we're constantly being presented every week, every day, with moments of content of a situation or of a circumstance that will draw us back into that storytelling, will drive us back into those tasks, will drive us back into like managing just that thing I need to get done, unless you're aware enough to say, okay, I see what's going on here. Let me pause and do the work.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's that pause that sounds so beautiful and creates all that space if you can build it in.
Yeah, and it's hard, right? Like it's hard, but it's so powerful it's purposeful and it's powerful as a set of tools when you finally acknowledge that so much of what it is that makes you right, crazy and frustrated and anxious and fearful is just made up in your head.
I was going to say what this is like being an American, like
Yes,
what we do.
This is what we do.
This is what we do.
We're making it up because it hasn't even happened yet.
Yeah.
We usually fear something that is in the future, which we don't even know. All we know is like right now.
Yeah. So when we met, you had been on this journey. You'd been to Costa Rica. You'd come back. You hadn't yet written the book, and you were running Stride. And you were, the first time I met you, you were leading a finance workshop, but you were already you were bringing in so much of what you'd learned and your spirit of coaching and sharing and helping people grow. So how does that dovetail with Stride Services and what it does and why it exists?
When we started Stride, my business partner, Eric Page, and I, and we have a couple of other co-founders too. In fact, just as a fact, we acquired this business about 3.5 years ago. But when we stepped back and said, why does this exist? Not what do we do, but why does this exist? We really wanted to lead with something that was purposeful beyond just the delivery of these services, which we can certainly talk about. But the why of Stride is we help people with a thirst for continuous improvement achieve their highest and best use, whatever that may be. So we help people with a thirst for continuous improvement achieve their highest and best use. And we do that by using data to help people make better business decisions. And we happen to do that today through the delivery of bookkeeping, accounting, and CFO services. But when we start with the why, it becomes so much less about the numbers and so much more about why does that even matter? And not only why does it matter, but who does it matter to? So we want to work with people that have a thirst for learning. And we want to have people on our team, employees, that have a thirst for continuous improvement. Mm. And so just stipulating that purpose orients us to a particular way of talking about what is typically seen as like boring-ish finance and making it more meaningful in people's lives.
Do you have, I have lots of thoughts about the way you provide your services that are different from and better than the 5 or 6 different bookkeeping firms and people we have worked with before you. And I think that's probably a common problem, right? You probably encounter clients who are like, I've either been working with one person I've outgrown, or I've been everywhere and not found somebody. But can you tell me how the why you exist and drove the way you do what you do, the way your team functions together?
Sure. If we're truly going to help an individual with a thirst for continuous improvement achieve their highest and best use, some things are really important. One is they need to have a high degree of confidence. Mm-hmm. The information needs to be accurate. They would like some assistance in achieving their goals, their financial goals, and they'd probably like to have a thought partner that they can talk to make sure that in pursuit of their highest and best use, they're oriented toward good financial responsibility, right? But number one is confidence. Number one is confidence more than anything else. And so what we realized is that what we're really delivering is we're delivering confidence. And oh, by the way, we also do bookkeeping and accounting. So to answer your question, the confidence piece starts from the very moment that you have that first interaction with an individual at Stride, how we ask questions, how we follow up, how we guide you, how we give you confidence that there's a team of people that's actually working on your account. So if, for example, you lost your client success manager at Stride because they went on vacation or they took another job, you're not feeling now anxious or losing confidence that things are going to fall through the cracks. Now, are we perfect? No, we're not perfect, but it is the orientation with which we execute. And a lot of that is how we grab you by the arm, metaphorically, and guide you on a journey where you feel safe so that you can spend more of your energy on the reason that you and Maggie started Kennedy Events.
Yeah. I even remember a lot of your visuals look like getting outdoors. They look like they could be your feet on the ultra running trail out there. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, that's beautiful, but what does that have to do with getting me good bookkeeping? And then I think you do a beautiful job of articulating like this, even in some of your language, like this frees you up. This is giving you confidence and informing you in a way that frees you up to make decisions or escape from that level of detail because you can trust that we've got it.
And it's difficult in this area of business because there's so many moving parts and it's day to day and everybody's touching it and different people are touching it. So there is a lot of process discipline and process design. You know it, right? Because you obviously are subject to some of it. And it's really all about living our principles. We live at Stride based on 12 principles. One of our principles is relentlessly pursue the creation of the impossibly perfect machine. relentlessly pursue the creation of the impossibly perfect machine. That's
Wow.
a principle. And that principle embeds in how we talk about servicing our clients and our business. We also have a principle, which is get and stay in sync. So maybe you've had an experience with us, Paige, where things were a little bit unclear, a little ambiguous. Maybe you were a little frustrated, or we were a little unsure. And
I'm usually sure it's me. Like,
we appreciate.
I'm the problem.
Well, you make that easy for us, but I assure you that's not always the case. So it's important that we exercise that principle of how do we address conflict in a really constructive way so that we can root cause it, solve it systemically, and move forward. Like that's a principle. So we try to be pretty principles based in how we roll.
That's fascinating. Have you had, and what have been some of your big turning points or growth milestones for Stride?
Oh, I think the biggest growth milestone for us, which we're still growing into, is the shift from having a federation of independent bookkeepers and accountants to a company, to a team of people where there is no reliance on any single individual. And that's a major shift for us. So today we have a growing team in the Philippines. I think we have about 25 employees in the Philippines today. They all work in pods at different levels, and they work on a group of accounts. We have a client success management team here in the United States. We've invested a lot in process automation, transparency, measurement, reporting, because we knew that we could not live our purpose if we were still just a federation of independent individuals, that if one of them left, you wouldn't be confident anymore. And frankly, we weren't confident because we didn't know what they were doing, because we didn't have enough transparency around how work flowed, that we would what we would be saying, selling, and what we would be doing would be two different things. And we weren't gonna build a business that way. And we want to scale this business. It's hard to scale by just adding bodies while simultaneously not living your purpose.
Right. So what are some of the things, I mean, that sounds like a big one, but what are some of your other things, either in this or in your coaching, that you're most proud of?
I think more than anything else, I am most proud of our team at Stride that has bought into these principles of life design architecture. Like, that's like really wordy and unnecessary. It's called conscious leadership. It's conscious leadership. And conscious leadership is about having the self-awareness that many of the issues and obstacles that we face in our professional and personal lives are typically of our own making, or at least we had a role or responsibility in that. So before we get on what we call the drama triangle of victimhood, villainhood, or heroing, before we get on that drama triangle and rant, we have a culture that is willing to acknowledge that we're in this situation because we were both unconsciously committed to being here at some level. And I think when you create a culture that accommodates that kind of desire to live that way, it's very low drama, and you just learn a lot about yourself. And we spend 70% of our time in the work environment. Why could it not be the place where you truly learn to thrive as a human being?
Do you bring your entire team a lot of these like leadership principles, or leadership lessons that you have acquired? You just mentioned like the drama triangle, which I'm familiar with, but do you bring that to your team, and what does it look like when you do that?
All employees that join Stride, they get two books. So one is One Life to Lead. One is the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, which is really the seminal book. Jim Dethmer and Diana Chapman are two of the authors, and they've done an amazing job. And then what we've also done is we've opened up some conscious coaching. We have somebody from the outside that does conscious leadership coaching for employees that would like to have it, and we just pay for it for them. We also are very open about being willing to participate in a get and stay in sync conversation between two employees and treat it as a learning opportunity. I have a friend once that said something I really liked. She said, turn the subject into the object, turn the subject into the object. And so we take the subject, which, oh, I've got this issue with this client, not uncommon. I've got this issue with this client. Well, let's take that subject and put it on the table, like create an object out of this issue. And now let's use it as an ally to learn something. Okay, so let's walk around it. Let's look at how we're reacting to it. Let's look at maybe another way to look at it. And it's amazing when you do that, how it just helps dissipate some of that frustration and anger. And what makes it awesome is if both parties are willing to engage in that same conversation. You're a great example of that. I could easily see if something went completely sideways with us for some reason, some accounting related thing, that we could get on the phone and we could work through it by sharing our respective feelings, talking about the crazy stories that we have in our head about it, talking about how it makes us feel, and coming to some acknowledgement about what was my responsibility in this, what was your responsibility in this, and what is the realm of possible resolution. That's amazing.
Yeah, so true. It makes me think of the phrase just went out of my head, but the phrase in improvisation that's like, what else could this be? Right? Like it's a coffee cup. And like if you have an improvisational mind, like what else could it be? Could it be a hat? It could be a flower pot. It could be whatever. You could play a game about what this is all day. And if you were to what did you just say? Take the subject, make it the object, and then play that sort of light game with it. It just loosens up, like you discover some new possibilities.
Right. Because your cup example, the hat or the pot or the mug, they're neither are any less true than the other.
Mm-hmm. It can be all of those things.
It could be all those things.
And maybe you were seeing it as one thing and I was seeing it. That's again, I'm always using the blind men and the elephant example. Like you're only seeing a piece of it and I'm seeing a piece of it from over here. Yeah.
And so if you're unwilling to engage in that kind of conversation, which is not uncommon, right? There are many unconscious leaders out there as there are conscious leaders, probably more unconscious leaders than conscious leaders. Then what do you have to fall back on? What you have to fall back on is what we call integrity, what we call principles.
Mm-hmm.
Being in integrity is living your principles. Being in integrity is what you feel and what you think and what you say are in unity. And that's all you can do because you can't control what the other person does, says, etc. But you can stay true to your principles. So maybe that's a bit of a joiner on the two topics.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. And so I'm going to shift gears and ask you something. You're bringing all this wisdom to this discussion. And I always find that when we talk, something you're curious about, something you're trying to learn, something new out there for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I am feeling, I was saying to my wife yesterday that I'm a little unsettled right now because I don't have like a big boulder or a big rock that I'm trying to move. I have a son that's heading to college, which is a big deal. Mm-hmm. But like last year at this time, I was on the precipice of publishing a book. I just ran a 100-mile ultra trail race. Like I trained for it for a long time. And right now, in this moment, right now, I don't have like, oh, what's that next thing? That's the 3 coming out in me, by the way.
Yep, I was just going to say that comes back to the Enneagram. Yeah.
It's so Enneagram, right? It's so Enneagram. And honestly, like I'm human, like I'm struggling with it a little bit. So what I'm curious about is, can I just sit in the space in the moment and acknowledge what is without getting anxious about what isn't? That's
just
it.
Getting curious about the present.
Yeah.
Instead of like looking for the next, either like long list of tasks or metaphorically mountain to climb.
Yeah, it's doing, and that's the work. Like it's doing the
Mm.
work. This wasn't a book I wrote because like, hey, I got it all figured out. Now you can too. This was like, no, this is the journey. It's not just mine. It's a lot of entrepreneurs. It's everybody's, and reference it with
Mhm.
frequency, maybe.
Yeah. You mentioned this great book, which I can't wait to look up, 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, and the authors of that book. But who are some of your other mentors, and what's the best piece of advice that you've
Oh,
taken away from someone?
one of my, well, two mentors. One is a guy named Andy Sack, and Andy Sack he's an entrepreneur in Seattle, and he's an amazing human being. He was he was the individual that taught me the concept of it's a get to. And this was at a moment a number of years ago where I had a situation that was not seemingly not very favorable to me. And I was really upset about it. And I came to him and I'm like emotional. I'm like, oh my God, like my life's over type of thing. And he said, is anybody going to die? It's like, no, they're not, but I feel like I am. He's like, listen, not that many people get to go through what you're going to deal with. It's a get to. I'm like, a get to? He goes, yeah, you get to do this. You get to have this experience and you're going to learn from this and you're going to be better for this. I was like, it's a get to. So I really appreciate him for that. And then the other mentor I have is his name is Lex Sisney. And Lex Sisney, Sisney, he wrote a book called Organizational Physics. He was a coach of mine for many years, and he just wrote another book called Designed to Scale. And what I appreciate about Lex is he's super talented when it comes to organizational design and organizational structures. He's a terrific coach and mentor, and has given me a lot of tools, many of which I reference in the book and give him due credit for, which he deserves.
Nice. Nice. So
Yeah.
looking for a quick wrap up here, but you've already touched on so many of these. What are like your most important daily rituals? That'll be our final question.
Oh, my most important daily ritual is fitness. I'm an avid ultra runner, as you know, but like there's nothing more important to me than physical activity, not as a path to like losing weight, but as a path to mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. You're one of those, if I don't do this every day, I'm a crazy person.
Yeah, something like that.
Most of the people I know who are ultra anything, ultra marathoners, ultra trail runners are like, might be drug addicts if they weren't that functioning on their fitness.
Many, and there are many amazing success stories. There's a guy named Ben Gibbard from Death Cab for Cutie. It's a popular band. I met him at an ultra race. We were running together, and he's like talking about a sold out show at Red Rock, and I'm like, you must be like a serious star, which he is.
Yes.
But then I went online, and he has some documentaries that have been done on him. Really just about what you said. It's a very addictive type of activity that can displace another addictive type of activity in a healthier way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's brilliant. I envy you that. I wish I had part of me wishes I had the addictive tendency that would get me to that, because I recognize it when I'm in it, but I don't have the drive or the need. So that's exciting. Well, thank you so much for your time, Russell. This has been delightful. I really appreciate it.
Inaugural podcast. I'm so thrilled and just happy to be able to spend time with you. So thank you.
Well, I'm grateful to you. And I always get so much out of any conversation we have together.
So. Mutual, Paige. Thank you for having me.
So much. All right. I'm supposed to wrap by saying we've been talking to Russell Benaroya, co-founder and partner of Stride, host of the Stride to Freedom podcast, and executive coach. Russell, where can people learn more about you?
Oh, well, I'd love for them to check out Stride Services at www.stride.services. So you can find me there, and you can certainly find me on LinkedIn and send me an email. It's all in the.
We'll put it all in the show notes. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Paige.
Thanks for listening to the Kennedy Events Podcast. Come back next time and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.